The silence of the void broke only when the engines of the vanguard roared. High Commander Kael stood at the observation deck. He looked down at the spinning gray sphere below him. Earth. The legends called this place a jewel. They spoke of blue oceans, green forests, and a chaotic, loud civilization. But Kael saw none of that. He saw only a tomb. Gray clouds choked the atmosphere. The oceans looked like dried-up scars on a dead body. Kael tapped the glass with a clawed finger. He turned to his lieutenant, Vrox. "Report," Kael ordered. His voice was deep, vibrating through the metal floor. Vrox checked the holographic scanners. "Nothing, Commander. No thermal signatures, no radio waves, no electricity. The planetary core is stable, but the surface? Dead. Cold." Kael nodded. This was exactly what the Imperial intelligence predicted. Humanity, the species that screamed so loudly into the dark for centuries, finally silenced itself. They consumed their own world. They burned their own sky. "Prepare the landing party," Kael said. "We go down. We claim the minerals, we map the ruins, and we leave. This is a salvage mission now." The vanguard descended. The heat shields glowed red as they pierced the toxic cloud layer. Turbulence shook the ship, but Kael stood still like a statue. He felt no fear, only a mild disappointment. He wanted a fight. He wanted to crush the famous human resistance. Instead, he arrived at a graveyard. The ship touched down in what used to be a coastal city. The landing gear crushed concrete and twisted metal. Steam hissed as the engines cooled. The ramp lowered. Kael stepped out first. His heavy boots crunched on the ground. The air filters on his helmet hummed, scrubbing the dust from the oxygen. He looked around. Skyscrapers stood like broken teeth. Some leaned against each other, welded together by time and rust. The streets were rivers of ash. There was no wind, no birds, just a suffocating stillness. "Spread out," Kael commanded over the comms. "Keep your weapons tight. Structural collapse is the only enemy here." The squad moved. 12 elite soldiers, armor gleaming in the dim light, walked through the ruins of a civilization. Kael walked to the center of a large plaza. He saw a statue, half buried in the dirt. It was a human figure, holding a torch. The face was gone, eroded by acid rain. Vrox walked up beside him. He kicked a piece of debris. It skittered across the pavement, the sound echoing too loudly in the quiet. "Pathetic," Vrox muttered. "They split the atom. They built networks. They reached the moon. And yet, they couldn't stop themselves from dying. Why do we even study them, Commander?" Kael looked at the empty horizon. "Because they were dangerous, Vrox. Stupidity is dangerous. They had potential, but they lacked discipline. The Empire endures because we obey. Humans died because they argued." Kael walked further. He passed the skeleton of a vehicle, a ground transport. Inside, 2 smaller skeletons sat in the back. He felt a flicker of something. Not pity, but understanding. Weakness has a price. The universe collects that price eventually. "Commander!" The shout came from the west perimeter. It was Unit 4. Kael moved instantly. He covered the distance in seconds, his heavy armor powered by hydraulics. He found Unit 4 standing near a massive crater. "What is it?" Kael demanded. "Look at the ground, sir." The soldier pointed. Kael knelt. He brushed the gray dust aside. Beneath the ash, the ground wasn't concrete. It wasn't dirt. It was metal, a smooth, seamless alloy. Kael frowned. He activated his scanner. The beam hit the metal plate and bounced back. Unknown composition. He punched the ground. It didn't dent. It didn't vibrate. "This isn't a ruin," Kael whispered. He stood up and looked at the city again. Really looked at it. The buildings. They didn't fall randomly. The debris. It covered the streets too perfectly. It looked like a set on a stage. It looked curated. "Vrox," Kael said, his voice tightening. "Scan the depth, not the surface. Scan deep." "Sir, standard protocol says—" "Forget protocol," Kael snapped. "Scan the crust, 5 kilometers down, now!" Vrox fumbled with his device. The rest of the squad sensed the tension. They raised their rifles. The silence of the city suddenly felt heavy. It felt like a weight pressing on their chests. Vrox watched the data scroll on his screen. His eyes widened. The yellow skin on his face went pale. "Commander," Vrox's voice trembled. "The sensors, they aren't hitting rock." "What are they hitting?" "Empty space," Vrox said. He looked up, terror in his eyes. "Commander, the crust isn't solid. It's a shell. There are massive caverns below us. And I'm reading heat. Lots of heat." The ground beneath their feet gave a low, deep thrum. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a machine starting up. Kael grabbed his weapon. He looked at the dead skyscrapers. "Back to the ship!" Kael roared. "Move! Now!" But the city woke up before they could take a step. The low hum grew into a deafening roar. It sounded like the planet was grinding its teeth. Kael sprinted. His heavy armor slammed against the pavement with every stride. "Move! To the vanguard! Launch protocols, now!" Behind him, the squad scrambled, but the city was changing. The skyscraper at their left didn't fall. It retracted. The massive concrete structure slid down into the earth with the smooth, oily precision of a piston. The street they just walked on split open. Thick, gray dust erupted like geysers, blinding the sensors. "My navigation is down!" Vrox screamed over the comms. "Magnetic interference! I can't see the ship!" "Visuals only!" Kael barked. "Follow my lead!" They reached the plaza where the statue stood. But the statue was gone. In its place, a massive ventilation shaft opened, exhaling hot, stale air that smelled of ozone and burning copper. Then, the first casualty happened. Unit 7, the heavy weapons specialist, took a step back. The ground beneath him didn't break. It dissolved. A trapdoor slid open with a hiss. Unit 7 vanished. There was no scream, just the crunch of impact deep, deep below. Then, the trapdoor slid shut. "7 is gone!" Vrox panicked. He fired his plasma rifle at the ground. The blue energy splashed against the gray dust, harmless. Kael grabbed Vrox by the chest plate and hauled him forward. "Save your ammo. You're shooting at armor." They reached the landing zone. The Vanguard was there, its engines spooling up, trying to lift off. But it was too late. 4 massive clamps shot out from the surrounding ruins. They weren't made of rusted steel. They were pristine, shining tungsten. They slammed into the hull of the Vanguard, crushing the thrusters like aluminum cans. The ship groaned. Fuel sprayed across the landing zone. They aren't just hiding, Kael realized, watching his escape route burn. They are fishing, and we are the catch. The radio crackled. It wasn't the ship's pilot. It was a broadcast, old, analog, and filled with static, a human voice, not a recording. Live. "Pest control to Sector 4, cleaning cycle initiated." Defensive circle, Kael ordered. Back to back. The squad formed a perimeter in the chaos. The false city continued to fold in on itself. The buildings sank, and walls of solid black metal rose to replace them. The sky, that gray, cloudy sky, began to flicker. Kael looked up. He zoomed his visor. The clouds weren't clouds. They were a holographic projection mesh. And now, the mesh was turning off. The true sky revealed itself. It wasn't empty. Hundreds of satellites hung in low orbit. Debris fields of destroyed alien ships Kael didn't recognize, formed a ring around the planet. This wasn't a graveyard. It was a trophy room. "Commander," Vrox whispered, his voice trembling. "Look at the walls." The black metal walls that had risen around them were opening. No lasers, no plasma cannons. Just dark, empty tunnels leading down. The message was clear. You cannot leave. You can only go down. Kael looked at his burning ship. He looked at his terrified squad. He realized the terrifying truth. The humans didn't attack the ship to destroy it. They disabled it to force the crew inside. Kael deactivated his rifle's safety. "They want us to come in," Kael growled. "Fine. We go in, but we make them choke on us." He stepped toward the dark tunnel. Into the dark, boys. The hunt begins. The tunnels didn't look like corridors. They looked like the throat of a beast. Kael and his remaining squad descended into the dark. The air grew hotter with every step. The sterile silence of the surface was replaced by a rhythmic, thumping heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of industry. Vrox checked his sensors. Temperatures rising to 50 degrees Celsius. Oxygen levels are thick, too rich. It tastes metallic. They reached a massive blast door. It stood 10 meters high, made of rusted iron covered in scratches and dents. It wasn't built for aesthetics. It was built to hold back an ocean. The door groaned. Gears the size of houses began to turn. The screech of metal on metal was deafening. The doors parted slowly, revealing the world beneath. Kael froze. He expected a bunker. He expected hiding refugees. Instead, he saw a forge. The cavern was endless. Lava, or molten metal, flowed in artificial rivers across the ceiling, providing a hellish red light. Walkways suspended by massive chains crossed the abyss, and everywhere there were machines. "Contact!" Vrox screamed. On the walkway ahead, 3 figures emerged from the steam. They were human, but they weren't wearing sleek spacesuits. They wore hulking industrial exoframes. Their armor was unpainted, scarred gray steel, welded together with crude rivets. Hydraulic pistons hissed at their joints. They didn't look like soldiers. They looked like walking tanks. Kael aimed his plasma rifle. "Open fire! Aim for the joints!" The aliens unleashed a barrage of blue plasma. The energy bolt screamed across the gap and struck the lead human. Fizz, crackle. The plasma splashed against the human's chest plate like water on a hot pan. The metal glowed red for a second, then cooled. No penetration, no shields to overload, just inches of solid, stubborn steel. The human didn't even flinch. He slowly raised his weapon, a rotary cannon that looked like it was ripped off a battleship. The barrels spun up. The sound was like a chainsaw tearing through bone. "Intruders!" The human's voice boomed through an external speaker. It sounded distorted, deep, and bored. "Clear the walkway! Brat!" The sound wasn't a laser zap. It was the roar of solid lead. Thousands of depleted uranium rounds shredded the air. 2 of Kael's squad members simply disintegrated. Their advanced energy shields flickered and failed instantly against the sheer kinetic mass of the bullets. "Cover!" Kael roared, diving behind a crate of raw ore. The crate shook as bullets chewed through it. Dust and sparks filled the air. This wasn't elegant warfare. This was brutal, primitive violence. "Our shields can't stop kinetics!" Vrox yelled, panic breaking his voice. "They are using solid slugs. It's barbaric." "It's effective!" Kael snapped. He popped up and fired a grenade. It exploded against the human's helmet. The giant stumbled back a step. The smoke cleared. The human shook his head, annoyed. A scratch appeared on his visor. That was all. The human stepped forward. Clang, clang, clang. The floor vibrated. He dropped his empty ammo belt and pulled a massive, serrated blade from his back. The sword hummed with vibration technology. Kael watched in horror. These weren't desperate survivors hiding in a hole. These were warriors who had turned their entire planet into a weapon. They didn't evolve to fly. They evolved to endure. "Fall back," Kael ordered. "Find a side passage. We can't fight them head-on." They scrambled away from the walkway, diving into a narrow maintenance vent. Behind them, the heavy footsteps of the ironclads followed. Slow, inevitable. Kael leaned against the hot wall of the vent, gasping for air. He looked at Vrox. The lieutenant was shaking. "We were wrong," Kael whispered. "They didn't stay on Earth because they were trapped. They stayed because this is their fortress." Kael and Vrox ran until their lungs burned. The tunnels widened. The heat dissipated, replaced by a chilling draft. They stumbled into a massive circular chamber. They stopped. There was nowhere left to run. This wasn't a factory. It was a nerve center. Walls of monitors stretched 50 meters high, displaying star charts, fleet movements, and live feeds from the surface. In the center of the room sat a throne, but it wasn't made of gold. It was a mess of black cables, cooling pipes, and data servers, and sitting on it was a man. He was old. His skin was like parchment paper, scarred and pale, but half of his face was gone, replaced by a complex optical sensor array. His legs ended at the knees, plugged directly into the throne's mainframe. He wasn't just sitting in the chair. He was the chair. He was the city. Dozens of the heavily armored, ironclad soldiers stood around him, motionless. Kael raised his weapon, his hand shaking for the first time in his life. "Stay back! I'll blow this whole room up!" The old man on the throne didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He simply rotated a dial on his armrest. The monitors shifted. They showed Kael's home planet. They showed the Imperial capital. They showed the coordinates of every major Imperial fleet. "Commander Kael," the old man spoke. His voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from the speakers in the walls surrounding them. "You are loud. You are messy. And you are interrupting my work." Kael stepped forward. "Who are you? The king of this graveyard?" "I am Admiral Vance," the man rasped. "And this isn't a graveyard, it's a bunker." Vrox looked at the screens. "Commander, look at the data. They aren't tracking us." Kael looked. The screens showed red dots approaching the solar system. But the dots were coming from the dark edge of the galaxy. They were massive, much bigger than the Empire's fleets. "You think you are the conquerors?" Vance continued, his mechanical eye spinning softly. "But you are just children playing in the sandbox. We didn't go underground because we were afraid of you." Vance tapped a key. A holographic map projected in the center of the room. It showed a swarm of darkness consuming stars, a cosmic horror, a biological plague eating the galaxy, sector by sector. "We went underground to hide from them," Vance said, pointing at the darkness. "The swarm, the great devourer, they hunt by detecting advanced civilizations. They eat radio signals. They eat energy signatures." Kael lowered his gun. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't destroyed their surface out of stupidity. They did it on purpose. They turned off the lights. They played dead. It was the ultimate camouflage. "We have been silent for 50 years, Vance said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "We let the galaxy forget us. We let the swarm pass us by. We were safe." The Admiral leaned forward, the cables on his neck stretching. "And then you came, with your noisy ships, with your open comms channels, screaming into the void. You just rang the dinner bell." Kael froze. "You didn't just invade us, Kael," Vance said mercilessly. "You just gave away our position to the things that eat stars." The Admiral pressed a single red button on his armrest. "Now, I have to clean up your mess." Sirens began to wail throughout the underground city. The floor shook as massive planetary defense cannons, guns big enough to shoot moons, began to rise to the surface. The ground didn't just shake, it screamed. Kael watched on the monitors as the surface of the planet, the fake ruins, the gray dust, the broken cities, began to split apart. Admiral Vance didn't look at Kael. He looked at the sky. "You woke the house," Vance said calmly. "Now watch the dogs bite." On the surface, 3 mountains crumbled. From within them, barrels made of reinforced tungsten rose toward the heavens. These were mass drivers, planetary railguns. They were kilometers long. In orbit, Kael's fleet, the mighty Imperial Armada, hovered confused. They saw the heat signatures spiking off the charts. They tried to turn around. Too late. "Fire," Vance whispered. There was no laser beam, no flash of light, just physics. 3 slugs, each the size of a skyscraper, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. They punched through the atmosphere, igniting the air around them into plasma. Boom! The sound arrived seconds later. A shock wave that dusted the camera lenses. In the sky, the Imperial flagship simply ceased to exist. The kinetic impact vaporized it instantly. The shock wave shattered the smaller escort ships like glass. In 3 seconds, the pride of the Empire was reduced to a cloud of expanding debris. Kael fell to his knees. He watched his fleet burn. "Effective," Vance noted, checking a datapad. "Efficiency is at 94%. The Admiral turned his mechanical chair toward Kael. The room went silent. The ironclad soldiers stepped back, creating a path. "I could kill you, Kael," Vance said, "but a dead man tells no tales." The Admiral pointed a metal finger at the exit. "Take your shuttle. Go back to your Emperor. Go back to the Council. And give them a message." Kael looked up, his pride completely broken. What is the message?" Vance leaned in, his single human eye cold as ice. "Tell them Earth is a tomb. Tell them there is nothing here but ghosts and dust. Tell them to never, ever come back." Kael fled. His shuttle was the only ship leaving the system. He sat in the cockpit, looking back one last time. The massive guns were retracting. The fake mountains were closing up. The artificial clouds were rolling in again. The planet was sealing itself shut. Kael engaged the hyperdrive. He didn't look back again. He knew the truth now. The universe was full of monsters. But the most dangerous ones didn't have claws or fangs. The most dangerous monsters were the ones who waited in the dark, with a finger on the trigger, waiting for someone to knock on their door. Earth was silent once more.